She forgot me overnight, but how did she remember the mistake I tried to bury forever? The worst moment of my life wasn't the day I committed the terrible mistake I spent a decade burying. It was the morning I woke up, looked at the woman who loved me, and realized she was seeing a stranger. I'm Elias, 39, a man who built a successful life on a foundation of sand and betrayal. It happened on a crisp Tuesday morning. I woke up first, wrapped in the familiar scent of lavender and old paper that always clung to Clara. She was my anchor, my brilliant, empathetic partner who made every stolen success feel earned. Our life together was meticulously constructed, the elegant brownstone, the successful publishing house I founded, the decade of shared history. Everything was perfect, precisely because the one terrible sin lay buried so deep beneath it all. I leaned over to kiss her good morning, but as my lips brushed her cheek, she jolted awake, her eyes snapping open. They were wide, unfocused, and instantly filled with pure, unadulterated terror. She didn't scream, but she shrank away from me, pulling the duvet tight around her throat. Her gaze swept the room, our room, decorated exactly to her taste, with a panicked confusion. Then her eyes landed on me. She stared, her breathing shallow, her brow furrowed not with recognition, but with desperate, defensive assessment. She saw the smooth, calm face of her husband, but her expression told me she only saw an intruder. I told her my name, her name, explained where she was. My voice was calm, but inside, I was collapsing. I watched as she processed the words, filtering them through a mind that clearly contained no context for me. She knew her own name, Clara. She knew the year, the city, even the make of the car parked in the driveway. She retained her core knowledge, her PhD in literature, her love for Jane Austen, her deep knowledge of obscure poetry. But she didn't know me. I was a blank space in the last 10 years of her life. The doctor's diagnosis was stark, rare, profound retrograde amnesia, triggered by an unknown stressor. Her personal, episodic memories of us were gone. She forgot me overnight. I was utterly erased. The beautiful life we built, the shared jokes, the quiet evenings, the entire scaffolding of my reality, it all vanished, leaving me standing in an empty space, holding the keys to a life no longer mine. If the person you loved most suddenly lost all memory of you, would you try to convince her of the beautiful lie you had carefully constructed, or would you seize the chance to confess the ugly truth you had buried? For the first few days, I was in a state of frantic, heartbreaking reconstruction. I showed her photos, our wedding, our travels, the day we adopted our old cat, Buster, 12. She looked at the photos clinically, observing the couple in the frame with detachment, nodding politely at the captions I provided. She accepted the existence of Elias, 39, her husband, as an abstract fact, but felt absolutely nothing for him. The terror of her amnesia was absolute, complete, and perfectly targeted. It was a clean wipe of all things us. But then the anomalies began. The first was the ledger. I run a highly successful independent publishing house, and my desk, which I brought from my old downtown office, is a magnificent piece of restored mahogany. Inside the bottom drawer, hidden beneath the velvet lining, I keep an old, battered, small leather ledger. It contains the real, handwritten records of the company's genesis. It's the single most dangerous piece of evidence of the mistake I made 10 years ago. I kept it close because the fear of its discovery kept me sharp. One afternoon, I came home to find Clara sitting at my desk, quietly examining the furniture. She was touching the desk, running her fingers along the mahogany with an unsettling familiarity. When she looked up, her gaze didn't hold confusion, but a strange, deep suspicion. "This is not yours," she said, her voice flat, devoid of emotion. "This desk belonged to someone else." I felt the blood drain from my face. "It's mine, honey. I bought it custom years ago. I love it." "No," she insisted, shaking her head. "It has the marks of Victor's work. He made that scratch right there, below the middle drawer. He was careless with his tools. He said he would never sell a piece that wasn't perfect, but he kept that one for his own office." Victor Hughes, 39, my best friend, my business partner, the man I betrayed. Victor had died 10 years ago, weeks after I launched the company using his proprietary data. His death was ruled an accident, but the truth was, I destroyed him financially, shattering his dream just before his death. Clara didn't remember me, but she remembered the microscopic scratch Victor had accidentally made on a specific piece of furniture. She knew the original owner of the desk and his habit with his tools. She knew a detail of the life she lived before I entered it. The retrograde amnesia was supposed to have erased the last 10 years, the 10 years Victor was gone, and the 10 years I built my life with his stolen blueprint. But it seemed to have skipped my crime and gone straight to the evidence. My mind was racing. Clara had been very close to Victor before his death, so close that I'd always suspected my connection with her only truly solidified once Victor was out of the picture. They had a shared passion for classic literature and artisanal furniture. I tried to redirect her. "Victor was my friend. We worked together briefly on this business idea. He passed away." "You worked together," she repeated, her eyes narrowing. "But he was the artist. He was the one with the vision. You are the planner." She looked at me then, truly looked at me, with a piercing intensity that saw through the expensive suit and the calm facade. "His life was chaos, but his mind was pure. Your life is ordered, but your hands are clean. Too clean." I realized then that the amnesia wasn't just stripping her memory, it was stripping away the layers of emotional influence I had exerted over the past decade. It was clearing out the narrative I had spun, leaving only the primal, moral facts she instinctively recognized. I had to investigate. I took the ledger from the desk drawer. It contained the original, meticulous research Victor had done for his dream publishing house, focusing on reprinting rare 19th century texts. I stole his contacts, his market analysis, and his unique distribution model. When I launched my company, I didn't change a single digit. Victor, crushed by the betrayal, abandoned the idea just before his fatal accident. The ledger was open to a page detailing his financial projections. I looked at the handwritten notes. Then, I looked at Clara, who was now standing by the window, staring out at the cityscape. Elias, she said, still looking away. Why is the number 47,000 so familiar to me? It feels like a point of no return. A number that represents a complete and final ending. I nearly dropped the ledger. Page 47 of Victor's meticulous notes detailed his capital requirements. The final figure he needed to launch his dream, before I sabotaged him, was precisely $47,000. It was the number I deliberately withheld from him, the final piece of capital I diverted to ensure his failure. She forgot me overnight, but she remembered the mistake I tried to bury forever. She remembered the emotional weight of a specific, devastating number. If your partner's mind suddenly developed the ability to remember your deepest moral flaw while completely forgetting your shared affection, what would you believe was the true purpose of their amnesia? I started testing her. I wanted to believe it was coincidence, that the human mind, seeking new anchors, latched onto random details. But her connections were always morally charged, always related to the debt I owed. I showed her a beautiful, old photograph of Victor and me from college. We looked young, idealistic, and inseparable. She studied the photo, her eyes lingering on Victor's easy, open smile. You look like strangers now, she commented softly, tracing a line between our two young faces. There is a massive barrier between you two. He is looking at the horizon, but you are looking only at him. Like you are calculating his next move. She was describing my exact state of mind at that time, the early greed, the creeping envy of his talent, the calculation that was already beginning to erode our friendship. We took a walk in the park. She stopped at the bench where Victor and I used to meet to discuss our dreams. The bench was now weathered and gray, but she sat down with a sigh of weary familiarity. I hate this bench, she whispered, pulling her coat tighter. It feels like cold promises were broken here. Like something essential was lost right on this spot. The mistake I buried wasn't just a financial transaction, it was a betrayal that took place right there, 10 years ago, when I told Victor the first couldn't invest in his project, all while transferring his research documents to my personal drive. The profound life lesson was hitting me in wave after wave of nauseating guilt. A true connection is not built on shared memory, but on shared integrity. When memory fails, the moral truth is the only thing that remains. Clara had forgotten Elias, the loving husband, but she remembered Elias, the betrayer. The life I built was so deeply poisoned by the original sin that her soul was rejecting the entire history. The situation became unbearable. I was living with a woman who looked exactly like the love of my life but saw me as a complex, vaguely sinister acquaintance. And yet, she was closer to the true me, the core of my decades-long guilt, than anyone had ever been. One evening, I found her in the library, standing by the shelf that held my personal collection of rare 19th-century novels. This was the specific, niche market Victor had targeted with his publishing plan. I had claimed this passion as my own, but it was his obsession I capitalized on. She pulled down a copy of an obscure text, the very one Victor had planned to use as his flagship title. She didn't look at the text, she looked at the publication date, the year my company launched. She turned to me, and for the first time since the amnesia, her eyes weren't just suspicious, they were accusatory. Who was Victor to you, Elias? She asked, her voice soft but absolute. Don't tell me he was your friend. Tell me what you did to him. The moment was a cosmic opportunity. Her lack of memory meant I could lie, easily and cleanly. I could maintain the narrative, keep the wealth, and continue to try to win her heart back through shared new memories. But her question didn't demand a lie, it demanded atonement. Her amnesia had given her a unique moral clarity, forcing her to see the truth that lay beneath all my expensive possessions. I looked at the book in her hand, the symbol of the stolen dream. I looked at her face, the only face I had ever truly loved, and I realized my life had been a decades-long performance for an audience of one, and that audience now saw the ugly backstage reality. I killed his dream, I confessed, the words tasting like ash. He had the idea, the passion, the plan. I stole it, I withheld the funding, let him collapse, and used his proprietary research to build my company. He died weeks later, financially and spiritually broken. I didn't stop there, I confessed everything. The exact steps of the betrayal, the falsified records, the way I had leveraged his tragic death to ensure my own success was untouchable. I told her how the beautiful life she saw was paid for with his broken heart. I watched her face as I spoke. There was no rage, no tears. Only a slow, terrible dawning of confirmation. She was not shocked by the revelation, she was relieved that the internal moral conflict she felt was finally externalized. The confession shattered the life I had built, but it liberated my soul. The next morning, I began dismantling the entire structure. I closed the publishing house. I didn't sell it. I liquidated the assets, established a massive, anonymous foundation in Victor's name dedicated to supporting independent writers, and began the process of undoing the financial crime, knowing that my own ruin was required for true justice. Clara remained amnesiac. She moved out, not in anger, but in quiet, moral distance. She told me she needed time to find who she was without the story of Elias. She took the old mahogany desk, saying it felt more honest to her than anything else in the house. I am now Elias, 39, living in a small, rented apartment, working as a freelance editor, back to the chaotic, passionate life Victor had once dreamed of. I lost the success, the wealth, and the woman I loved. But here is the final, profound lesson I learned from Clara's amnesia. A person can lose every memory of love, connection, and shared history, yet still retain the instinct to recoil from a deep, fundamental lie. My wife's mind gave her the perfect escape hatch from a life corrupted by betrayal. I may never win Clara back. I may never share another memory with her. But every morning, I wake up and look at the bare walls of my small room, and I know that the man reflected there, though poor and alone, is finally living a life worthy of the true connection I once possessed. I lost her, but I saved my integrity, and in doing so, I finally stopped burying the mistake forever. I want to know what you think. If the universe gave your loved one amnesia as a moral tool to force your hand, would you have chosen the difficult, ruinous path of confession and atonement, or would you have rebuilt the lie? Let me know your opinion in the comments, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.